Ladies and gentlemen, I am Paul, U.S. Army combat veteran, and today we are checking out more unbelievable intercepted communications from Russian soldiers on the front line. And we are going to be asking ourselves, is the illusion that Russian state media is so carefully concocted starting to break apart, even to the Russians who have been its primary audience? Let's get into it and see what's going on.
Guys, as I was expecting.
This is, as always, guys, from Insight. Let me make sure I get this right. Insights from Ukraine and Russia. I always link in the description. You guys should definitely check them out. It's a fascinating channel.
Russians really don't like mobilization. They were protesting yesterday. The empire of lies is falling apart since even the most patriotic wives of Russian soldiers now see that they've been lied to. Just listen to this interception and you'll hear very surprised and upset wife of a Russian soldier. Let's go.
So again, one of the things that's interesting when I was deployed is that you know what is happening. You know that when you're sitting safely in a dining facility, when you're getting a shower, but your family doesn't know that. All they have to go off of is maybe what they're reading in the news. And for them, it can be terrifying every day. They don't know if somewhere far away you're hurt, you're injured, you're dying while they're making dinner. And it can be really, really traumatic, honestly. My mom still says that the year I was deployed was the worst year of her life. For a variety of reasons, only partially related to my deployment. But the moral remains is that when you sit there and live under this stress, you're going to lash out in some direction.
Мне пришло утром сообщение, что ты доступен. Я хоть выдохнула. Я сильно переживала. У вас там жопа? Говори честно. Я не про вас вообще ничего в чатах так мельком. Пишут про другие подразделения. Тимур, давай ты услышишь меня? Я тебе серьезно говорю. Это уже ненормально.
When you're deployed, a taste of home can make all the difference. And you know me, I love coffee. So if I could get good quality coffee, it was a huge boost to my morale. That's why I wanted to talk about today's sponsor, Disney's Beans. Disney's Beans was started by active duty military and their family members to provide made-to-roast coffee to military members stationed overseas or deployed. They provide free shipping to the U.S. and to P.O. boxes around the world. And with a shipping time of just 5 to 7 days after roasting, you know the coffee you're getting is still fresh. And they provide military members and veterans with a 20% discount on their order. All the products at Disney's Beans are roasted just for you. The artisan roasting provides a flavor, texture, and aroma that is unique to each single origin coffee. Choose coffee from a variety of countries, including Honduras and Brazil. I personally am partial to the Brazilian coffee, not just because I've spent a lot of time there, but because I drink my coffee black, and so having a smooth, drinkable flavor right out of the brew is important. So check the link in the description and get your Disney's Beans coffee today. Yeah, you know it's bad when your spouse is telling you to flee to the rear. That's pretty unbelievable to sit there and tell one of your soldiers, one of your husband to be like, hey, forget your duty. This isn't worth it. Get out of there. Abandon your post. That's pretty wild. And again, it always makes me wonder how quickly Ukrainian soldiers are surrendering, Russian soldiers are surrendering. The reason being is that, one, the Russian government, it already is not very popular. Most Russians privately acknowledge that it's an authoritarian regime without a ton of legitimacy. But that was before they were sending friends, family, yourself off to die in a war where literally Russia does not have strategic or existential interests at stake, right? This is the status quo was completely normative for Russia. There was no pending change to the geopolitical landscape, and Russia's public justifications for this are literally nonsense. Ukraine being a state of, I don't even know if I can repeat it, neo bad guys, and when you're sent by this sort of government to do this sort of mission where you almost can't come up with a real justification for why you're doing it, it really, and combine that with the fact that your enemy may actually be able to offer better life for you and your family than your state, which is deep under sanction. You see why you get these sort of get to the rear. But I imagine the incentives to desert, especially if you're someone who doesn't have maybe a wife and kids who might feel some repercussions of your desertion. If you don't see those, you may be real tempted to just dip off and try to start a new life in another country.
Понимаешь?
Не уехать отсюда.
Почему? Отказывайтесь. Я не знаю, что делаете. Тимур, это не дело. Где находишься?
По Дольгину.
Со всеми все нормально?
Ну, не совсем.
Тимур, это вообще. Я не знаю, что делать. Я с ума здесь сойду.
Вчера кадыровцы к нам приехали.
Ага.
Okay, Kadryovsky, I think is his way of saying Chechens or Kadyrov. Maybe the dictator himself, but probably he's referring to Chechen battalions. And this is what we've talked about, right? Russia has to make only bad choices in the strategic situation they're faced right now, where they have extremely limited combat effective units, and they have to choose where to put them. In obviously the Kharkiv region, they have to stabilize their lines. They have to get combat effective troops who can blunt the Ukrainian offensive. It seems like they are almost unable to do so. Every time they move effective combat units to plug a hole, another hole opens up just because there's so few units that are combat effective, have the right equipment, the right training, and sufficient morale. We've talked about this, where morale when you're winning isn't that big a factor, right? Morale shows up when units are hungry, when they're under considerable attack, when the odds seem stacked against them, and their leadership, right, the high command, the headquarters, they don't exert as much influence, right? And in a chaotic battlefield, that can happen very quickly. And that's when you rely on morale. Morale is what keeps soldiers in the trenches, lets them fight the enemy fiercely. And morale is a complex set of things, and it's different for every soldier. But there's some things that are absolutely core to the truth, right? Good food, stable uniforms, but also things like a sense that the leadership cares about you, that you are fighting with and for your brothers in arms. You also, of course, have the idea that you're fighting for something of real importance and significance to your people. I know it's almost comically untrue at this point, but a big motivator for lots of troops in Iraq and Afghanistan was the idea that by fighting terrorists in those countries, that they would prevent terror attacks on American soil. And again, I think the reality was that probably wasn't the case mostly. But that sort of reason d'etre, right? That reason to go out there was a powerful motivator for many, many soldiers.
С нами. Ну, и их половина покатила вчера, блин.
Да ты что?
30 осталось около 15.
Тимур, ты понимаешь, что мы позиции сдаем? Сейчас в июне Зеленский вовсю уже там танцует. Там просто со всех направлений говорят, что все нормально. Это перегруппировка идет. Я знаю, что у нас тут СОБР в Костроме собирает, туда направляют.
Okay, SOBR is cops. So they're at the point where they are sending cops to the front, right? And this is bad for a couple of reasons. Not only is law enforcement not the same thing as military operations. They're not even close. And there's a reason why, if you've served in the military, you still have to go through a police academy. It's because they're totally different jobs and totally different tactical situations, though there's some common threads, like working as a team, like using weapon systems in an appropriate way. Thinking about threats before they happen, right? Being cognizant of threats and positioning yourself in a way that enables you to respond to them. Those are all sort of broad skills, but then again, there's lots of threats like that. Lots of roles and jobs that have those traits. It's doubly a problem, not just because they're not super well-trained not soldiers, police. It's because you're also pulling police away from your country. And as you can see, as the level of instability grows. There's more protests. There's more threats domestically that Putin needs to keep a lid on. And by deploying his best and most loyal police officers, he's exacerbating that, right? It's gonna be harder to control the protests.
Понимаешь? Ты знаешь, что Белгород хочет вовсю, эвакуация идет. Белгород, Россию, Донецк хочет. Понимаешь? Ну просто по новостям-то говорят, чтобы сберечь наших солдат, мы их на время вывели. Да
right, Donetsk. And she's saying Donetsk too. As we've talked about in the daily updates, Donetsk is the capital of, the puppet state, the DNR. And so that means that, again, that literally an independent country still can't keep its capital city from being shelled. And that's, of course, because it's a province of Ukraine. In every country less Russia has recognized this. And so, right, they're saying, oh, we're withdrawing from the capital of our independent country. Like, she's saying that sounds like BS because it is.
Никого не вывел, понимаешь?
Я знаю.
In the Soviet era, you have to remember, guys, that Russia was a master of propaganda, a master of what we call information operations. And information operations are what influences people to do things in the simplest terms. But Russia was famous not just for using information operations in other countries to influence groups within other countries to take certain actions. For example, communist guerrillas in South America, or even communist parties in the US and Europe. But they also would use it on their own people. The catch is it was much easier because the state controlled all media. Remember, there was only television, radio, newspapers. That was where people got their information. And of course, the most important, friends and family. The rumor network. And if you could control the top three, you could at least create confusion about the rumor network, right? Rumors whisper down the lane, right? They're inherently sort of hard to understand. They're hard to track, but they can be some of the best sources of information because they come from the most trusted source. But Russia's famous for being able to just create confusion about what's going on. And you can see here, this woman is really starting to be able to cut through that. And that's in part because of things like the internet has democratized a lot of information. It's much harder for Russia to control it.
РМО тоже водители.
Вот
это
у нас
пиздец.
это
Никто вообще...
за нашей деревней вот как раз их.
Это какой-то полк там, не десантников, не наш полк, порезали вообще. Я знаю, что на них напали и порезали.
Right, you can see this is information that's not going to be put out in Russian state media in the newspapers or televisions. The only way she could get this is from friends and family, which again is incredibly enhanced in the modern era because of things like Telegram and WhatsApp and Signal. Now you can have a WhatsApp group and tell your whole family the same thing right away. You could have a neighborhood WhatsApp group. You can have a WhatsApp group maybe with friends from her school or church where they're all going to triangulate what is going on and what is really happening. And not only that, but you have things like VPNs and the ability to reach into other countries and see a totally different news environment. And once you don't trust your own news, that's when alternative news sources are going to start to work their way into your news diet, information diet.
Происходит вообще. Ты знаешь, что здесь? Здесь увольняют сразу. Те, кто отказники теперь, им даже отпуск не дают.
Да,
сразу увольняют.
Now let's hear what a Ukrainian separatist was discussing with his wife on the phone recently. Let's go.
Россиянке я звонила. Он дозвонился до этого комбата, до местного. Он даже не знает, что они раненые. Их, нету на позиции. Он говорит, вам поменять неким. Что-то там 30 человек осталось в этом
Yeah, so what he's describing here is a breakdown of command and control. This is where brigade and battalion commanders no longer are receiving information in about the disposition and composition of their own troops. You know, it's sort of like sometimes a meme, the Sun Tzu term, you know, to know the enemy, know yourself. But it's literally true. It's not just some symbolic or some ancient truism, right? The reason is because you need to, if you know that the enemy has a tank brigade, then you need to know where your anti-tank weapons are. And you need to know where your anti-tank forces are, right? So when you have these situations where even basic information, such as who is in these defensive positions, right? Who is left to fight? What is the strength, the combat strength of your units? When you no longer have that information, you have lost command and control. Your units are either unable to reach you because, for example, radios don't have batteries, right? Or because they're cut off, because they're unable to get resupplied, or they're not even able to pass along messages physically, right? The roads connecting them to their headquarters might be severed somehow. Or it could simply be a situation where the unit has been eliminated, right? And they are out of contact because they are out of existence. So any of these things can be the case. So when you're a commander and you lose touch with the unit, you really are left with some dire questions. You go, it's possible that literally the unit is at full strength, not engaged, awaiting orders, and has a broken radio antenna, or the unit's been completely eliminated and their position is currently held by the enemy. But without command and control, you don't know that. And if you don't know those things, then you have no way to respond to realities on the ground. You don't even know what they are. This is how brigade commanders end up being captured, because they literally lose touch with all of their subordinate units. They're sitting in their headquarters tent with no clue what's going on. And then eventually the enemy forces knock on their door. This is really telling that, as I've said in previous videos, command and control seems to be failing in the Russian military.
Энергодаре. Причем тут Энергодар, я так и не поняла ничего.
Днепрорудно, может. А он не знал, что у нас вообще тут 10 человек осталось из 20.
Ну, наверное, не знаю.
И что он рассказывал еще?
Ничего. Сказал, будет...
Куда? В Россию?
Ну, я так поняла, что да. Я знаю, что весной пересечь границу стоило 100 тысяч.
Ooh, the spring price to cross the border. This means, I think, that border guards are actually accepting bribes to let people across. And again, this is something else that happens when law and order starts to break down, is you have individuals with a modicum of authority start to monetize that authority. This would make sense, of course, given what we've heard about the Russian forces' inability to receive pay. And if you can imagine your fighting forces aren't getting pay, you can imagine what routine bureaucrats like border guards, bureaucratic administrators, visa processors, you can imagine what their pay status looks like. And once you have that problem where they're not receiving pay, or they're receiving a tiny fraction of their required pay, then they begin to find other ways to monetize their authority. And charging to cross the border is one such way.
As usual, please leave a like and comment under this video. It helps a bunch.
Anyway, guys, thank you so much for joining me. And of course, as always, if you want to see the combat video breakdowns, right, those are increasingly being demonetized and censored by YouTube. So if you want to help me out and you want to become a member of the Patreon, the link is in the description. That's where all my combat video breakdowns are. And I try to post one every 2 to 3 weeks. That's usually a compilation of 5 or 6 breakdowns. Anyway, I'll see you guys in the next one.